Hi everybody, this is Tony from Historic American Homes, and we're back to look at kind of a wrapping up an important stage here in this design of this mid-century modern inspired small home. You may recall in the last video I was contemplating a couple of slightly different options to the two bedroom bathroom areas. I've settled on how those are going to be, so I'll give you a quick look into that. I've swapped things around inside this bathroom, flipped things around, and moved the window to accommodate that. So now we have the door swinging so that if the door should happen to be left open, it would actually block the view of the toilet from the social space. It also does not interfere. There was a conflict before between the door and the shower. Now that's gone. And on the other side, we have the main bedroom bathroom and some changes here. I decided to reduce the amount of hanging space in the closet, increase the amount of shelf space, and I did that mainly because I could then jog this out and give this bathroom just a little more elbow room. It seemed like it really needed it. There's a little bit of a conflict here which I can resolve. I'm not too worried about that. I'll get to that later. But basically, the plan is really finalized now. There's nothing more to do. Oh, also, as far as this wall, the fireplace, I went with what I was calling option 1 in a previous video. I thought as this design is intended as a stock plan on my website, I would go with the simpler option of the two that I had done. This would give people more choices as to how they might want to decorate the space. And on this side of the room, I've proposed a built-in buffet. Some little shelves on the end, ties into this structural column, and the whole thing is raised up off the floor. It's hung from the wall, supported by that column. Made of the same materials as the cabinetry in the kitchen and the coat closet at the entrance, so that this all reads as like built-in furniture. Anyway, that wraps up the main design work on this. And so we're going to look at a couple of details that I had left unresolved up until now. Principally, the roof. We had the roof line in place. I knew from the start pretty much how the roof was going to go, but a lot of detail connected to making it look right, and that's done. So the roof is sloping down this direction at what we call a 2 and 12 slope. So that means for every 12 inches of horizontal, it rises or falls 2 inches vertically. And this piece of roof here is falling in the same direction at a 1/4 inch per 12 slope. So quarter inch per 12 is the absolute minimum roof slope that you can do. You never really do a flat roof per se. So 1/4 inch means that we're going to need to use some kind of a roofing like a sheet roofing. It could be EPDM roll roofing. It could be TPO. These are various kinds of roofings that are applied as a sheet material. And I lean towards EPDM in general. It's super sturdy, lasts a long, long time. Doesn't contain vinyl. I would like to avoid vinyl-based products when I can. So this roof is designed as a, is going to be designed, excuse me, coffee hasn't quite kicked in fully, as a sheet roofing. And as such, 1/4 inch per 12, it allows me to go down to 1/4 inch per 12. If this were a metal roof, I would not be able to go to what's basically a flat roof in this section here. I'd be limited. And if I was using a shingle roof, 2 and 12 is already pushing the limit. So there's only one little detail here that I'm not quite sure about, and I'm probably going to change, and that's these two little beam ends that stick out. I have all these beams identical running all the way across, and I kind of like that. It looks great on the other side. But on the front, on the entrance side, I think they look kind of weird sticking out here. So I'm probably, before I wrap this up, I'm probably going to cut these two beams off so that they end inside the wall. And then you'll see the straight wall face going all the way up. About the roof, though, I'm getting a little distracted here. Let me turn one more thing on. I made a little mock-up off to the side of this roof plane, the main roof plane, and the flat roof. And the trick I was working on here, the thing I was trying to sort out, was how I wanted to handle the eave, the detailing of the eave. I did a previous video where we looked at what was done on some other mid-century modern homes as far as eaves, and I found some of them quite nice, and some of them very chunky and heavy looking, in my opinion. The heavy looking ones tended to be thick, and one single solid piece for the whole eave. So what I did was I did two things. One is I tried to minimize the thickness of the roof, and two, I broke the eave, the edge, into two parts. As far as the thickness of the roof, that's a challenge. In the 50s and 60s, these houses were often built with just the main beams. Let's move over here and take a look. The main beams here, and then spanning between the beams, 2x material or even a 3x material boards, tongue and groove boards laid flat, which were capable of spanning all the way between. Often these houses even had no insulation at all on the roof. Now that's not an option anymore. We need a properly insulated roof. So that means we have to have a certain amount of thickness in order to accommodate the insulation. If you're wanting, depends on what climate area you live in according to the code, but that could mean anywhere up to 18 inches thick for insulation, depending on the kind of insulation and how much of it you need. Now, an 18-inch thick roof line would have really just squashed this house. It would have looked silly, a little house with a huge hat. So what I did was I opted for another choice, which is called structural insulated panel. So instead of framing the roof over the beams, it's a sandwich panel, which is the bread in your sandwich would be 2 layers of oriented strand board, and the filling of the sandwich is rigid foam insulation. The 3 kinds of rigid foam, there's expanded polystyrene, which often is called styrofoam, which is a brand name. Then there's extruded polystyrene, and the third typically used is polyurethane. Per inch, polyurethane gives you the highest insulation value. So it's also more expensive, but my goal here was to minimize the thickness. So I went ahead and based this on a polyurethane structural insulated panel, which is 8 1/4 inches thick. 8 1/4 inches thick. And then on top of that, I've allowed another about 3/4 of an inch, which is basically the roofing itself, the EPDM roofing itself. And then for the eave detail, what I've got is I'm thinking cedar. This would be a 1x6 lapped with another 1x6 and a little spacer up on top to get them to line up properly. And then the underside, the ceiling, when you're looking up, or the soffit if you're outside, would be tongue and groove 1x6 boards as well. And that worked really well on the bottom edge of the roof and on the rakes of the roof. But it brings up a problem at the upper edge. I should back up one moment and say that these structural insulated panels, so here's my main roof line, and that's a 30-foot long structural insulated panel. I believe that's the maximum length you can get. So it's square cut at the low end and it's square cut at the top end. You can order them angled, but I wanted to just keep the cost down as much as I can since I'm using a somewhat expensive roofing product. I thought I could keep the cost down by going square cut. A square cut at the low end gives a nice angle to the eave, an angle that matches the roof slope. Let's get in here and take a look. And a square cut on the edges works fine. Where it becomes a problem is at the top. A square cut at the top is leaning back away, so that you'd end up with a lot of rain hitting the face of it and running down. So I had to come up with a solution that improved on the top edge. And what I came up with, the challenge is getting the rake boards, these boards, as they wrap around, to line up with the boards at the top edge. What I came up with was I took the slope, we'll move over here and look at this one. we were to, well, let's draw a reference line, vertical reference line here. So this dashed line is a vertical line, and this is the square cut panel leaning out. I've put my my eave pieces, eave 1x6s up flush tight to that lower edge of the panel, and this gives me a certain angle. It's 2 to 12, the same angle as the roof slope. And then what I've done is so what I did in order to make the top work was I'll draw another vertical. I tilted out the same 2 to 12 off that vertical line in the opposite direction, and I've run my cedar eave trim angled to match that. So this dashed line is vertical, and this line is sloping outward at 2 to 12, whereas the actual panel itself slopes back. So what we can do in order to construct this is just simply use some 2x4s trim to fit a piece of blocking, that shape that I'm outlining with the mouse. And every so often, probably every 2 feet, there would be a piece of blocking, and then the soffit, the eave trim, would be nailed to that. And these angles, by doing the angles this way, it makes these boards line up nicely as they wrap around the corner. And then I've repeated the same up here. And a similar solution for the eave for this low sloped section of the roof here. The angles are slightly different because the roof slope is different, but it's the same basic solution. And then finally, the last step to detailing all of this is getting some gutters on there. I'm a firm believer in gutters. They often look pretty ugly, so the challenge is doing them in a way that looks nice. So what I'm proposing for this house, this design, is a copper half-round gutter. A 5-inch would be more than adequate for this size roof. Copper half-round gutter, and then a type of rain chain. The downspouts, the standard downspouts, I don't really care. Mostly they look pretty ugly, and they also need to be mounted against the face of the wall, and I don't want to have to bring a downspout with this deep overhang. I don't want to have to bring a downspout all the way back to the wall and then down. It would look pretty hideous. Rain chains are a possible solution, but the type that are actual chains are not very effective. They don't hold the water well enough to carry it down to the ground during a big rainstorm when you've got a lot of wind. On the other hand, there's a type of rain chain that's available that's like a series of cups that hang one from the next, and the water ends up in these cups, which slows it down and protects it from the wind so that the water can be directed all the way down, properly down the central shaft down to the ground. Now, once it gets to the ground, that doesn't show in this model here, but these downspouts need to be tied in to a underground pipe, like a 4-inch pipe that can carry the water well away from the house, at least a good 10 feet, and it should be in a direction where the water won't flow back towards the house. It may be necessary to do a dry well, drain into a dry well, or it could tie into the city's storm drains if you're building in an area with storm drains, or if you have the option of putting in some cisterns, you could capture the rainwater and reuse it for landscaping. That all is entirely site dependent, and this is a stock plan that could be built on a variety of sites, so I'm not going to get into that part of the solution. But the idea is to carry the water down to the ground where it would then be captured and carried away from the foundations of the house. So that really finalizes the exterior detailing, the roof, the siding. I've carried the brick from the fireplace around the outside just to kind of tie the chimney, appearance of the chimney into the walls, which I think looks nice. Gives it a little bit of an accent. I've put a little brick planter in front to echo the chimney. And let's take a look. Well, let me say that, so this is my main model. There's the house. Now, this being a stock house plan, I'm not designing it for a specific site, but I do, if I were, and I do like to do this anyway, even with the stock plans, I have a site model as well. And I'm just assuming a flat site. But I like to put it into a site and then do a bit of landscaping around it, partly in order to have some nice presentation drawings and partly in order to suggest some of the exterior arrangements people could do. So I'm going to move over to the other model, which is my site model. This is a separate SketchUp file completely. However, I will say that the house that you see in it is imported from the other file. So this house model is identical to the one we were just looking at, and I never edit this one in my site model. If I need to make a change to the house, that happens in the house file. And what we see here is that it's just referenced into the landscape site model. So let's take a look at a couple of views. Here's a view from the street as you approach. And you can kind of see the effect of the planter box by the front door and the chimney. Planter box, and there's a chimney up there. Let's rotate around. You see the rain chain coming down. Oh, sorry about that. They make a special kind of mouse that's good for this kind of work, and I don't own one. I'm just using a standard roll mouse with the roll wheel. Makes the navigation a little easier if you have one of those other ones. Anyway, there's the back, facing the garden. A nice patio off the living room so that you can have some outdoor socializing if the weather's good. I've got it oriented south at 45 degrees latitude. So the shadows you're seeing are based on south at 45-degree latitude. I don't remember what time of year, but I may do one last thing, which is design a bit of shading. This looks like summer shading, and that's pretty good. I've got a broad overhang that puts most of the patio doors in shade, so the room inside is not overly lit. Anyhow, that pretty much wraps up the detailing on at this stage. And so what I'm going to do next is, in the future videos, is move into doing the actual construction drawings, the floor plans, the sections, the elevations, and show how we extract those from the main model here. We have to set up views, which are these tabs up across the top. And then these views get referenced into our file, our construction drawing file, using the program Layout. So in the next video, I'll start showing that, and hope you enjoyed seeing this design develop. I think it came out pretty nice. There's a whole playlist of these, tracing it from the start to this stage, about a dozen videos at this point. Check my playlists. If you enjoyed the video, please click like, please subscribe. I'm working on several other designs at the same time, different styles. Anyway, have a great day. Thank you.